Hi, everyone, and welcome back. Thanks so much for joining on this Friday afternoon. We are very excited to welcome today Don Murphy from American Cannabis Collective, here to talk about everything that's been going on the political sphere that relates to cannabis. As most of you know who are following Don, he's had a very exciting couple of weeks lately, being at the RNC, being a delegate at the RNC, and of course, just kind of being back on the Hill and getting back in the swing of things on the cannabis side, which is great. So we're excited to sit down and kind of chat through what that's been like and what he's seeing ultimately. Good reminder, real quick, before we jump in. Of course, if you have any questions, comments, anything like that, want to say how much you love Don, which I will be the first one, you are welcome to put that in the chat. You can put that on any platform except for Instagram. So just making sure that you know that and are aware. Also, hey, Stevie, great to see you. A million things I just said back to back to back. But Don, how are you doing?
Well, it's good to be back. I'm exhausted. I want to be honest. I've been to 7 of these things, and I don't think I ever came back so tired as I did this time. We were lucky enough to have a hotel just outside the perimeter, so every day I'd walk back and forth to the hotel a couple of times. I think it was probably put 7 or 8 miles just walking to and from. But when I came home, collapsed on the sofa, and I just turned on the TV. I said, let's see what the rest of the world sees and what they think, what the narrative is on cable. It was different depending on what channel you watch, for sure, but it was good to be there. And it's good to be home.
Yeah, well, I was surprised. I was going to say, I know the RNC is probably a crazy kind of marathon feeling event, but I feel like you've almost been doing the conditioning already. You've done the bike ride, you've been on the Hill, you're walking constantly all the time. We've been out there a few times with you, and the mileage you get is crazy. So I'm sure you are probably one of the most well-trained in terms of getting there, which is good. But would love to hear a little bit, because I know we'll talk about the contents and how it relates to cannabis as well. But if this is your 7th one, you've done a ton. Would love to know just kind of what it's like. Can you kind of give us some insight into what the day is like, what you do, how early you guys are getting up? You guys are, sounds like a walk from the hotel. What's sort of the day by day?
Yeah, a couple of interesting things. First of all, we get up, and now we're in an hour time zone difference, so that takes a couple of days to get used to. You're used to, like eating earlier, and then they have these brunches that are later. We have members of Congress who come in and speak to us, and I tweeted out some of that. That's always good to get up close and personal and have the doors are closed. There's no press involved, and they can share, really what they're thinking. And the truth is, though, the real kind of interesting part is the fact that I was actually there, and I was invited to be there. I didn't have to crash the party. I didn't have to sneak in or any of that stuff. But even considering what I do, and I'm fairly well known for it in the GOP circles here in Maryland and among the Trump inner circle, the fact that they even allowed me to be there, I think, is telling. When everybody's screaming on Twitter about how if Trump wins, we're done, that's just not the case. The fact that I had these 4 credentials to get on the floor, the fun part about it was I'd see members of Congress and they go, hey, and then you could see them sort of like stutter in their head, like, what are you doing? And
you're here?
You could see them try to like look down and they'd see my credentials, like they think I was a guest and I somehow stuck on the floor. And I'm like, no, I won these, and some of these members of Congress weren't even delegates. They were there as members of Congress. I've had many of them say to me, this is my first one, or this is my second one. And I'm like, well, if you need me to help you get somewhere, let me know. Be happy to usher you around. That this is not a deal killer for the most conservative Republicans in my state. They may agree or disagree, but they don't say, I can't vote for Murphy because he's, pro cannabis policy reform. So, and look, there are plenty of people there who weren't great on this issue, but especially not the members, but the people you talk to, you'd say, well, what do you do? And I tell them, and they're like, ooh, no, I can't do that. I'm like, oh, how many kids you have? 2. Well, if you caught him with pot, would you call the cops? Of course not. I'm like, well, then you agree with me, right? You don't call the cops on your kids. Why do you call the cops on everybody else's kids?
Yeah.
They stop and they go, okay, maybe you're not so evil after all.
That's good. I feel like that's the biggest part, is sort of that normalization kind of. I think a lot of people, Congress people will see you in the halls and talk to you, and they recognize you. When we've been, they definitely recognize you and are having friendly conversations with you. I feel like seeing you there, especially when Trump is there, it does sort of add that extra layer of not closeness, but sort of trust, which I know is a big component in politics and kind of how they wheel and deal a little bit. So hopefully I feel like that will also continue to help build those relationships when you're talking to them. They really see, hey, it's not so bad. It is fine. You're able to have those conversations that kind of put it in perspective. And yeah, it's really, I think overall, just very, very, very exciting. And you said
Yeah.
it was the 7th one?
7th, yep. Started in 2000.
Wow.
Yeah, 2000 was my first one in Philadelphia. And that was the same sort of thing happened. That was back when I had just introduced the first medical marijuana bill in Maryland that became law by 2003. And so I was really like, people were really like, oh no, I couldn't be a part of the Bush slate, but I ran at a state party convention and beat the Bush slate and actually ended up going to that convention back then. So that was when it was novel. I mean, people now just like, okay, they
Just
don't
cannabis, whatever.
care that
Yeah.
much. I talked to a senator yesterday, and he said he believed that this issue, that cannabis, legal cannabis, medical, whatever, was going to exist and persist. They have resigned themselves to that, and I'm trying to help, carry that belief, that idea that this is going to happen whether you like it or not. You can get on board and steer it in a direction you want to go, or you can sit back, let the voters do this, and then you get what the voters give you, right? I had a member from Oklahoma say to me, do you know how bad this bill is? And I'm like, this ballot initiative that they passed years ago. And I said, yeah, sure. And they still voted for it, right? Like they would rather have this bad law than the existing prohibition in Oklahoma. And so this is what you get. Now, if you want to be an honest broker and fix it, then you need to do something, but you can't just keep saying no because your constituents are saying yes. So that's a fun conversation to have on the floor of the RNC for sure, right? But
That's so exciting.
anyway,
I can't wait because I feel like it did come from a place of prohibition at the start and kind of very, very scared, very, very off put by cannabis. Now, like you're saying, I do think it is sort of the recognition that people want it. It's here. It's time to kind of make some changes to reflect your constituents and everything. But I do hope we do see that kind of next step level of more embracing it. I don't know if that happens sort of in this election cycle. I know with the Trump and Kamala shake up a little bit more. I don't know if that is more on the table because it kind of makes it more of a, not a central issue at all, but it definitely brings it more into focus rather than just sort of an age debate and kind of a non-race a little bit, I guess. Now it feels like
look,
that.
I sure would like it to be a more central issue. It's not going to be central, but maybe it will get elevated to a point where there's a conversation and there's an on the record comment by former President Trump. He's going to vote in Florida for or against this. It's on his ballot, and his voters. It'll be interesting to see. And I would tell them, hey, look at what happened in 2016. Medical marijuana got way more votes than you did, sir, with all due respect.
Yeah.
And I think adult use is going to do the same thing, whether it clears 60% or not. That's still left to be determined, I suppose. But I don't think Trump's going to get 60. But what do I know? But it'll at least be close. It'll be something. I'll have those numbers right away saying, look, this is how the people in your state feel. So
true. I'm so excited for November. How do you normally spend your election night in terms of, are you glued to the TV? Do you do it with people alone? What sort of the?
In 16, I did it. My wife and I were in Florida. I'd spent a month down there campaigning for Measure 2. I think it's Measure 2, the medical, and for Trump, and for Rubio and all those guys. I'm out there knocking on doors and sign waving, doing all that stuff for all of that. We're like, you're for pot and for Trump, really? Like, and then I have to explain why, and they don't get it. But yeah, we were sitting at home like so many other people in the condo where we were in Clearwater. And generally I'd rather be alone. Look, I lose more often than I win, so I don't want to be with people when you lose. I was the chairman of the McCain campaign in Maryland, and I was in Florida on election day and flew home that night, landed at the airport, and my wife picked me up, and we went to the victory party. And they wanted me to speak. I'm like, I'm not saying anything. Like the first ballots, the first states were coming in. It's like Kentucky for John McCain, Indiana for John McCain, and people would like cheer. And and then they'd be like, Tennessee too close to call. I'm like, uh-oh.
Oh,
You know, I am not going to spin this. It was bad. I knew it was bad early. With the Trump thing, it was like, I don't think anybody believed it was possible. Like, is
yeah.
Trump going to be the president? Like, and then as the night went on, it just got crazier and crazier. And then it was like 2 a.m. He comes out.
I was going to say,
Sorry for the delay. It's crazy business.
it was a late night decision. Oh, sorry. I was going to say, I definitely remember the same thing, kind of following it on my phone, staying up. I'm normally not a person that stays up very late. I can't stay up late, but definitely was the whole time like, wow, it's changing. It's crazy. So we'll see what happens again. And again, I think that is probably the best way to spend it with your family. Is probably an easy way to do it.
So look, before we sort of move on, one of the
Yeah.
benefits of being in the room, in the hall,
I
is
do
being
agree.
able to see what is going on in the president's box, in Trump's box. Who was there? Who was not there? Who said what? For example, DeSantis apparently went to his Florida delegation and ripped into Measure 3. But he didn't say anything about it in his speech. Actually, no one did. There was no talk. Like, if you thought descheduling or Measure 3 was a problem,
Mhm.
you would say it publicly, but they're not, because they know the numbers. They poll on all this stuff. You know, come on, they poll on everything. They certainly poll on this, and they know where it is. Was not mentioned at all. But one of the co-chairs of the cannabis caucus, Brian Mast, was there. He spoke. Nancy Mace spoke like right after him. Those
Yeah.
two leaders in our party on this issue were there talking about this. Two of the leaders. And then they were sitting in Trump's box, whispering in his good ear. You know, like,
Oh no,
I just couldn't help it.
that's funny.
So, like, there was Vivek Ramaswamy speaking, I think in prime time. I had a conversation with him. He remembered our little interaction during the debate. He like pointed to the sky, goes, "Yeah, you were." Yeah, I'm like, "Yeah, that was me."
That's great.
And he said, "Thanks for being here. We need to continue this conversation and change where this party is on this issue."
I think that's great. I definitely do want to talk more kind of about the conversations you had both on camera and off camera, which again, thanks for taking us along and kind of giving us that insight and kind of making us feel like we're there, which was very nice. But did want to touch on something that was mentioned and get your take on it. The whole kind of right to try stuff. Do you think that, because I know for us immediately things sort of like cannabis, for us, maybe even psychedelics, but is it in that range? Is it something entirely different? Is it what's your,
To me, it is absolutely consistent and it's in that range. I once said to Ted Cruz, I said, "Hey, I want to thank you for your advocacy and support on right to try. Does it include cannabis? And if not, why not?" Now I knew it didn't, but it was my opportunity to sort of put these two together. And there's not a lot of daylight there, right? You're gonna let people try a whole bunch of untested pharmaceuticals that who knows what kind of reaction people are going to have. But somehow cannabis is a no. It doesn't make any sense. But the fact that Trump mentioned it in his acceptance speech, in his 92-minute acceptance speech, not once, not twice, but 3 times, suggests to me where he is or will be as if he's president again.
okay.
I am not concerned at all that Schedule 3 will get delayed, rolled back, or anything because of Trump.
Okay, that makes sense. Do you think it is, because I know you're saying they're pulling everything, and of course this is their time to really shine and kind of get some ideas ahead. Do you think it's the kind of safest way to temperature check how people are feeling on cannabis, or is it not related to that? And again, it's just sort of in line with them not getting in the way of cannabis. What's your take there?
They won't get in the way, but if you look at the number of members of Congress who have weighed in a negative way, with the DEA and the comments or the letters or whatnot, it's very small. Like, everybody else is either missed their opportunity or chooses not to take a stab at this, or they just don't want to go there. And I think they'll follow Trump's lead if he's president. If he chooses to legalize cannabis or deschedule cannabis, they will virtually all fall in line. I'm sure, we've seen that before with criminal justice reform that he did, that he got very little credit for, by the way, very little credit. But yeah, he'll be okay on Schedule 3, certain of it.
Yeah, That is true. Also, yes, brain dead, not a brain dead comment, a good comment. I think that is true. I think things will move forward on scheduling. It just needs to be set up, which is good. All right. Well, then final things on the RNC stuff. I just want to touch base. I feel like, again, you talked to a ton of people. What were the conversations? I know, again, of course, I know you don't want to say who said certain things. Was there anything that was sort of said that you're like, that gives me a little encouragement? I don't know if you can share anything there, but was there
Well,
anything that like,
it's funny. I saw a number of members, one of whom will remain nameless, but he was in his delegation with a good member and a bad. He was the bad guy, and there was a good guy, and there were a number of elected officials. I mean, that's the people who were there. By the way, I think there was a missed opportunity to engage the Florida. Speaking of DeSantis, the Florida delegation, 125 of the most politically influential people in the state of Florida were all seated together, including the AG who was there, who was pushing back against this. Would have been a real good opportunity for the industry, the advocates, the proponents of Amendment 3 in Florida to be there and engage those folks. As it was just left to DeSantis to tear him a new one. So that was a big missed opportunity. But in this one particular state, there were a bunch of elected officials standing around. And I said to the bad guy, I'm like, he says, "You're winning." I'm like, "I want you to be on the winning side. I want you to be on my side here. Like, why do you want to be a loser when you can be a winner?" Now, there are a whole bunch of elected officials and they're just eating this up. They were just loving it. And then they came up to me and they're like, they're in a state that does not have medical, in a southern state. And they're like, and I had lobbied there and I testified there in the past. So I said, I'd like to come down there. And they're like, anytime. Yeah. You need to like engage our members because they just don't have anybody on our side of the aisle talking to them. Like, who in the advocacy world, fits my demographic, my ideological demographic, at least. There's nobody.
Yeah.
So I may go out and do some state stuff depending on the outcome of this election. If it's all D's, I'm probably like, see you, Capitol Hill. I'll see you in a couple of years. But otherwise, I'll get a chance to go to some of these red states and maybe, help pull medical across the line because they should need it. Patients shouldn't get their medicine based on what state they live in or their zip code.
Yeah,
adult use is one thing, but medicine should be across the board, and that's why I'm such a big supporter of Schedule 3.
Yep, I know that's been a driving force for you in terms of being an advocate, and I do agree. I do think you are kind of silver bullet's the wrong term, but a unique force, I think, for making progress and kind of communicating with like-minded Republicans and all those things to kind of push them forward. Is there anything that you would want to be kind of armed with, or that you think would help kind of really push that forward? Would you need industry people kind of to try to explain some of the stuff, or try to, say, hey, here's somebody who is doing it. Here's kind of their case for it. They are a normal business, or what sort of anything that would help you kind of help make that case?
It would be great for the industry to show up in these states and explain the dynamics of how it works, how it works in these other states. That's the benefit of going not first. Not last is not good, but not first, okay? Sure. And they can explain that. And I would, if I was in this industry, and I say to industry folks, if you are not inviting your elected officials to come see your facilities, you are part of the problem. Like, you are not helping. You need to show them how legitimate this business is. This is not, growing pot on the side of a hill and selling it out of the trunk of a car. That's the status quo. That's what we want to fix. So it would be great to have the industry showing up in the states. If I end up going that direction, I'll reach out and try and make some folks.
We can try to. Yeah, I think that would be good, because I think they do want to share those stories. From some of the operators that I've talked to, they are trying to have those standing invites. But I think it's one of those things where I don't know if they think, cannabis not kind of a pressing issue. There's been a ton happening this year that might have been able to pull focus. So I'm not sure, but I think that would be interesting. Also, great question. Anything that we can do as sort of the public, or anything that would help kind of support you supporting the industry, I guess, ultimately, and that medical progress.
To follow up on the last comment, not just the industry needs to reach out, but if you have a story to tell, if it's a back burner issue for government, but it's the only issue if you're sick and you're using it and you're getting benefit. You need to make that endorsement known to your elected officials. I mean, let's be honest. The gay rights movement moved as fast as it did, the way it did, because people suddenly like came out. Then instead of like talking about, gay this and gay that, you were talking about Billy and
My
Susie,
neighbor.
people like that you knew, and all of a sudden you're like, oh, you had to dial that back. That's the same thing with cannabis. If you know, and Trump said this, I know people who use it for medical purposes, and for whatever reason they get great relief from it or something to that effect. And when I heard him say that, I knew instantly he was not going to seek law. He's not going to seek the Johnny Law on grandma who's got cancer. Just not going to do it.
Which is good. And that's it is a bit of a sad thing that for both the candidates, we're looking for that as a bar, because it is so silly that we don't have it already. I think we're far, 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 far overdue from making progress, making change. But again, I think it isn't encouraging to see at least that things are moving forward.
Look,
it's sort of
those
here,
stories,
like you're saying.
when I say you need to share their story, that's why I'm here. Because one person said, do you think I'm a criminal? And I'm like, no. Well, you got to do something. So here I am.
That's good. What do you think that, I mean, it's obviously hard to speculate, but what do you think that he would think of where we are currently? I feel like it's so different from even not that long ago, ultimately.
Well, I didn't, I don't know if you know the whole story, but the guy who did that, passed away before the bill, became law or could even have a hearing. So it's unfortunate I can't, share that with him, but I think his family and friends are pretty happy with what has turned out to be his legacy. A legacy when, he was a decorated veteran, and even that to me is like, okay, as great as that is, he's done more for more people than he'll ever know, or will ever know.
That's true. I will also, again, not to credit you too much or over credit you, but I think you are the one that is kind of taking on that voice and taking that forward. So credit there, I think, as well, which is important.
Thanks.
And thanks for doing that. I think it's obviously incredibly important. And I think everyone here is also very appreciative, which is great. All right, let me see. Seeing some questions come in. As speaking of sort of the medical side and rescheduling and everything, any thoughts that you have currently in terms of where we are? We're on the other side of the comment period. Things are in motion. Not necessarily what the next steps are, but do you think anything is not at risk of derailing? But what's sort of your general sense of where we are?
Well, I don't think anybody's going to push this for political purposes. I don't think the Biden administration is going to say, hey, put your foot on the gas. We need this. We need this by November. I don't really think it will happen by November. I don't know. Like, there will be enough people who will step up and try to throw a monkey wrench in this so that it doesn't happen at all, but certainly doesn't happen before November. But that's not stopping the Biden-Harris campaign from using it as if it had already passed, right? We've done these things, we've rescheduled, whatever, they call it criminal justice reform, nobody should go to jail. Schedule 3 does not do any of those things, but that doesn't stop them from using it. So I don't think they need it to actually happen to, change their political calculus and their narrative and what they're trying to sell. That's not gonna matter at all.
That's good. Again, I think it's one of those things where hopefully it's something we're looking forward to having, but I know we're looking for a lot more beyond that. So we'll see. Should we mention the dreaded S word? Safe. Let's talk about it. What's going on? I saw you were teasing something interesting in your tweet. Would love to hear.
Yeah, I got good news. I got bad news. Like the bad news is I don't think SAFE is political as it once was. And when I say once was, meaning just like a month ago, when Biden was the guy who had very little in the way of social justice reform, anything. Like Schedule 3 doesn't do any of that, right? So in order to have some social justice, equity, bona fides, he needed SAFE incorporated with the HOPE Act. SAFE was going to be a vehicle for hope in order to be able to say, I've let this many people out of, pardon this many folks, which if I'm not mistaken, Trump has actually pardoned more. So that's an interesting number. And this is what we've done to get money to the states so people can, have their records expunged, et cetera, et cetera. And that would pacify, at least momentarily, the progressive left, who is very unhappy with Schedule 3 and very unhappy with SAFE and all that stuff, right? It gives them what they want. But now that Harris is should be the nominee, right? She doesn't need that so much, because over the last 3 years, she's burnished her social justice equity credentials in a way that is not exactly her history. She is changing her history as we watched her as vice president do some things and lean into this issue beyond where Biden was. So she's in a better place than he is, for sure. I don't think she needs SAFE and HOPE in the same way he did. Now, that's the politics. The policy changes are, and the good news is, this is sort of a recent development in Florida, and I linked to a story about the Treasury Department issuing some letters to members of Congress and pushing back on this anti-woke, anti-ESG banking bill that was just signed into law. They're saying it makes it difficult to prosecute, go after money launderers or terrorists. So the dynamic has suddenly changed, that this is now, SAFE is not about politics at all, but it very much could be about policy and the need to do something. The dynamics have changed. I've talked to people who are really close to the negotiations here, and they said, and I just want to get this right, SAFE is more on track than ever because of what happened in Florida.
So slimming it down, making it less complicated, making it something that is just addressing one thing, then kind of multiple things to take that step forward.
Well, there's that section 10 in there is really sort of important. And so probably Democrats are more upset about that, and they want to take SAFE and make it fix Florida. So whoever's in charge, and that would be Chuck Schumer, would have an extra reason, an ideological reason, a policy reason, not politics, to do something sooner rather than later.
Yeah, we'll have to wait and see, I think, ultimately. Sorry, one sec, wait. Seeing on Brain Dead, but great, I think, check in. They are saying some stores are starting to use third-party processing payments as a bypass with higher fees. That's interesting, as kind of a get around before having something like SAFE, which I think ultimately to me just shows there's such a need for a working system. You probably want one that's more standard and more normal, and we're kind of able to do that with something like SAFE, which makes sense. Any thought on?
Well, look, that may be true. All that may be true, but if frontline and even in the back end cannabis employees, if they're getting paid in cash or they're getting paid, in some other way, and their income can't be used to get a mortgage, it's people who can't get a house. Now, I know there's a lot of people right now in this environment who can't get a house because of the interest rates. You can't even afford to buy your own house, if you want to think about it, right? If you're at a 3% and you're going to get a 7%, your mortgage is doubled, and you can't necessarily afford to live in the same house you're living in right now. But that's beside the point. The point is, those folks should not be treated as second-class citizens, and we are a legitimate. We have a legitimate issue. Patients are legitimate. This industry is legitimate, and it should be treated legitimately. And that means we need banking. Yes. Just that simple. Shouldn't have to do these workarounds. It's ridiculous.
That is true.
Most of these businesses aren't making money anyway. I don't know if you saw this story in Marijuana Moment today, that there was a study done. It was part of the comment period that showed only a quarter of these businesses are making money. I always looked at this as no, I didn't want to go into this at all for multiple reasons, but that was another one. I know people, I'm watching, your show and people in your comments and people that follow me who bought at 50 and it's now 5 or whatever it is, 10, and they hate it. But I would never tell my friends to go into the cannabis industry. And if you look at the disparity between, as much as I hate to do it, this thing pointed out just the gap between Black and brown, minority businesses and majority businesses. Minority businesses were 18% successful. So I find it strange that advocates want to create a system where minority participants can get in a business that has an 82% failure rate.
Yeah, running any kind of business is super hard. I think you need the support. You need, I think it's hard. It's tough. I agree there. One sec. Sorry, really quickly. Seeing some comments come in, which is interesting. Sorry, real quick. Also, yes, that would be great to see. Finally, someone pro safe. When do we have the next steps on safe in terms of when we
Well,
have
sadly,
updates?
not till September. They're basically gone. The Senate
Dang.
will be in for like 2 more days next
Okay.
week.
Okay.
They're not going to deal with this. And the truth is, safe is more policy than politics, but
Yes.
politics are really amped up now, right?
Yes, they are.
It's
This has to be one of the craziest elections. I feel like, again, I have not been watching a ton of elections over time, but it feels up there, right? Am I
no,
wrong?
it's not up there. It is there.
Okay.
There's been no crazier election in my lifetime. I wrote a little memo to a friend of mine, and I said, this, as crazy as the 60s were, from the Kennedy assassination in 63 to the LBJ's stepping down in 68, that was 5 years.
Yep.
It just happened in 8 days.
That's crazy.
Just 8 days. And we had a convention in between. It was a crazy, weekend and day. And it was interesting also to see on Capitol Hill, and I've seen this for a while, Democrats were really in the tank on Biden. They did not, everybody saw it. I saw it. Honestly, I saw it in 2020 when I was talking to him in New Hampshire. He had like a 2-minute conversation. I was shaking his hand. I'm like literally like holding him up. And I'm thinking, this is a dead man walking. And not just politically, because he came in like 5th in Iowa and 4th or 5th and 5th in New Hampshire, and minority voters in South Carolina saved him. He owes them more than he gave them, in my opinion. But I'm like, anyone who's ever been in his company has had to see what I was seeing, and then it just accelerated. But look, I'm not a doctor, but I know what I can see. I can see what I can see.
Yeah, of course. No, I agree. I think definitely the right choice to step aside, I think. But we'll see how that plays out in terms of the Democrat side and what happens there. I think ultimately we'll see. I think a lot of people are feeling a little nervous, but I think that's why, again, a lot of the work that you're doing is so important. I think being able to be there and kind of really get a sense of things and communicate what you're seeing, what's going on. Cannabis, of course, a lot of people are focused on, but just kind of generally, I think it's important to know and have a sense of what's going on because it is so crazy and because I think people are worried. All right, I know we're close on time. I really quickly wanted to hit another CV's questions. Hemp, any thoughts, any changes? I know, again, you're mainly focused on cannabis.
Look, and I really try to stay out of hemp because back when hemp was starting to move, members were concerned that the cannabis side, me, because I'm the one they knew, was going to push, for amendments that went, not just hemp, but full-blown THC cannabis oil. And so I stayed out of it, and I'm still sort of out of it. But it's fun to watch this war within the GOP. There's a war with hemp and the fun part of cannabis and the not so fun part of cannabis, right? They're at war. The industry's at war, and the Republicans are kind of at war too, right? And a bunch of them are now stepping up and defending their industries, their hemp industries within their districts. I think if the industry within Republican districts, and there are Republicans who represent cannabis businesses, if they had a relationship with those Republicans, we would make much more progress than we're making now. We would see that kind of relationship that I'm seeing with hemp and Republicans. We could see it with adult use and medical states too. I know we could.
That's so interesting because I think to me, like the hemp drinks in general do seem like an on-ramp for the average person potentially into cannabis, or at least realizing that it might not be the worst thing and it's not kind of the crazy gas version of cannabis that recreational people see and are scared of sometimes. But that's interesting to see that that's also paralleled a little bit on sort of the politician side, which makes sense. But
once an elected official makes the case for hemp, it's like when Republicans in the South embrace CBD. I'm
yes,
like, well, come on, you're welcome aboard. They're like, oh no, but we're not for that. Like, why not? Oh, you only like care about sick kids, but not their sick parents.
yeah, yeah,
The
yeah,
reason we got CBD is because young mothers pushing strollers with sick kids, as crass as that sounds, in the halls of state houses, got people to say yes. We weren't just talking about some hypothetical. We were talking about people, and people you could shake their hand and see their tears and see their kid.
yeah.
We don't do that with medical. We don't do that with adult use. We just don't.
Maybe we should. Interesting. Because yeah, I think that is ultimately what it is. It's getting that, like you're saying, visibility and awareness and making it concrete, which is so important. Okay, interesting. All right. I'm seeing a question from Jax, which I'd love to get an update here. And then I think we'll just talk about how your zoom out feeling of how you're feeling. But Jax is asking, can you talk about the American Cannabis Collective and explain what's going on there? What's the deal? What's the deal? What's going on?
So
Love it.
that's the organization I helped found with Gretchen Gailey, and it is a free market group. This is what we do. We are not for all the other stuff that is a part of the Christmas tree, and we just believe in taking the message to the elected officials in a way that we don't see being done by the other industry organizations. We don't fund people who are now part of a board who weren't there to help us when they were in a position to help us, and we think that's the wrong way to do it. And we work both sides of the aisle. We don't just work one, and we speak truth to power for the benefit of patients first. That's our first concern. General consumers second, and then the industry that supplies them third. So, not in a mean way, but to your viewers,
Sure.
your portfolios are not my first concern.
Yep.
And it's I have no equity in this space, none at all, for multiple reasons. But one is so I can say to elected officials, I don't benefit when this happens. I don't have a medical card. I'm not a regular consumer. It's not that I care about that, because some people will say, oh, you just want to get high. And I'm like, respectfully, Senator, if I wanted to get high, I'd be home getting high. I wouldn't be talking to you about why I should be able to get high.
Yeah.
But that's what we do. And, please, follow us on Twitter and look us up.
Yeah, I was going to say, so in the bio, you can see if it's at American CCO, that's the Twitter account if you want. And then if you just Google American Cannabis Collective, you can find the website as well. But yeah, you guys are posting a ton of great stuff on there. So definitely recommend anyone who's watching, who follows Don, the work that he does. That's a great way, another great way to kind of stay informed of what's going on and support. So I think that's great.
The other thing we do is we push back. We don't think you can fight a war just on defense. Right? We're going to go on offense. And when people say stupid things, either the general population or elected officials, we push back on Twitter or in person or wherever. And, we want to make an example. You say stupid things, you're going to, not great things are going to happen. We are going to respond. We are not going to let nonsensical comments by elected officials of either party go unanswered. And that's
not let the nonsense fly. You're going to hit back and kind of, that makes sense. I think that's how new ideas come forward. You need to kind of shake loose the old ones that don't make sense anymore or are not supported by science and all those things. So I think that makes sense, and appreciate again you doing the work. Wanted to wrap up with sort of a final thing. How are you feeling on sort of just the general landscape as you're zooming out? You're on the other side of the RNC. You've done a ton of work. How are you feeling sort of currently now? And then we'd love to know afterwards your weekend plans, but that'll be later.
Yeah. All those things we want will happen. Sure. Over time, we will get there. We are on the right side of this. We're on the right side of history. The status quo makes no sense. And for those who think, oh, we're not moving fast enough, look, I've been doing this for 25 years. Where I started and where we are now, it's inconceivable that I would be having this conversation, that you would have people selling pot stocks on the exchanges, that there would be a cannabis a chamber of commerce, multiple cannabis chambers of commerce. That was inconceivable 20 some years ago. But here we are. Like, where do you think we'll be in the next 20 years? I know that may not help your portfolio in the short term, but it's good. I feel very good about what you'll see in your lifetime, what I'm going to see in the balance of my lifetime. I have no doubt we're going to get there.
I definitely agree. And again, thanks for all the work you're doing. I do agree, if you're trading around it and kind of trying to catch the ups and lows, that's going to be a lot tougher. I do think if you are longer in the industry, hopefully those changes kind of compound as we go. We'll see. Nothing's promised. I know ultimately, again, it is from the patient's perspective that you're working. So I think that's really important. So re-highlight. Yeah, thanks so much for what you do. What are you doing this weekend? What's the vibe? I just biked in today. I don't know if in Maryland it's as nice and beautiful as it is here. It's surprisingly not humid.
Yeah.
Are you doing any bike? I know you're not just biking, but what's your weekend?
I'm going to a memorial service for a former delegate who I should link the story, or I'll have you link the story. She was the 12th vote, the deciding vote in getting my medical marijuana bill out of committee. And she was a no right up until she was a yes. And she didn't let the chairman know she was a yes until the roll call started. And when it got to her, she said, I've been a no forever, but today I'm going to be yes. And let me tell you why. And the chairman took a big gasp because he didn't want it. He didn't want it at all.
Sure.
And he just closed the book, stopped the roll call in the middle of the vote, and adjourned the voting session. And they walked me into the back and said, you're not getting a vote. And this is why I tell people, like, civics is 50% plus one to pass a bill. No, it's one. You need the chairman plus 50%. Because if you don't have the chairman, you don't even get a vote. There are thousands of bills filed in DC. Most of them don't get a hearing or a vote or anything, which is one of the reasons why safe banking is so far ahead of where some people think it is. Oh, we have no progress. The hell we don't. We may not have a law yet, but we have a ton of progress on safe banking. It may not be where you want, may not be where I want, but it is way off the start line. We are way down the road on this one. And anyway, so I'm going to memorial service, and then I think I'm going to go visit a friend who has a place on the bay, and we'll do some bike riding, and I'll crew his sailboat.
I will say also, it seems like if you also want another beach time, you also have a standing invitation for Noah in Delaware. So you're welcome to do that.
Okay.
You got a lot of votes. That's good. Okay. Well, thanks, Don, so much for taking the time. Really, really appreciate it. It's been a crazy few weeks, so appreciate you kind of helping us break it down. Again, I will recommend everyone out there to follow American Cannabis Collective, and of course, Don, if you're not already, which I'm sure you are. With all that said, thanks so much. Enjoy the rest of your Friday and enjoy the weekend.
Thanks for the invite. Take care.
Before investing, carefully consider the investment objectives, risks, charges, and expenses found in the prospectus, available at AdvisorShares.com.